The end of the Second World War marked a turning point in Romanian history. The Soviet sphere of influence extended over Romania and encouraged, with great efficiency, the organization of a socialist regime. The forged elections of 1946 were an important step towards this goal. The transition phase ended on December 30, 1947, when King Mihai I abdicated and Romania officially became a People's Republic.
The Economist, 3rd of January 1948. Ex-King Michael. The abdication of King Michael has made Romania a People's Republic, bringing it formally into the same category as Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria and Mongolia, the most progressive states in the world after the USSR. The wartime allies owe a great debt to King Michael for one of the decisive actions of the war. On August the 23rd, 1944, he made his country break with the Axis. Thereby, he opened the German southeastern front to the Russians and shortened the war by many months. But he also ensured that the whole of Central Europe would be liberated by Soviet and not Anglo-American troops. Marshal Stalin showed both a deep historical understanding and a pretty sense of humour when he awarded the king the highest Soviet decoration, the Victory Order. For King Michael's brave blow at the Germans, who were exploiting his country, set in motion the Sovietization of Eastern Europe, which has now driven him from his throne. The abdication is only a formality. The Gleichschaltung of Romania was completed 2 months ago, when Mr. Manu was sentenced to life imprisonment and when the non-communist parties of the government, the Socialists and Liberals, lost the last remnants of independence. For 2 years, King Michael has had no power. His formal opposition to the Groza government had to be abandoned when the Western powers recognised it in early 1946. Even his personal household had long been filled with men considered safe by the Communist Party. So his position has been equally embarrassing to himself and to the Communists. The decision to abdicate was announced suddenly, without any of the anti-monarchy propaganda which was used before the proclamation of a republic in Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. It may be hoped that the regime will now have the decency to leave him free to go where he will, and marry whom he wishes.
During the following years, Petru Groza and later Gheorghe Gheorghiu-Dej resorted to all means necessary to consolidate the new regime. All political opposition was eliminated. Education was reorganized according to Marxist-Leninist principles, agriculture went through a brutal process of collectivization, and industry developed according to central planning.
The Economist, 19th of January 1952. State discipline in Romania. During recent weeks, the Romanian press has been presenting a glowing picture of the highly productive industrial machine which has been built up in Romania. According to these articles, the first year of the state 5-year plan was, to all intents and purposes, completed 1 month ahead of schedule. The names of those enterprises which have contributed to this achievement, and even of individual workers who have overfulfilled the norms allocated to them, have figured prominently in the pages of Scânteia, Viața Sindicală, and other official papers. There have been proud claims that some workers, notably in the textile industry, have already started on the 1952 and even 1953 output programmes. The Times, 26th of November 1952. Romanian Canal progress. 2-mile stretch completed. Information reaching London from Romania gives an insight into the methods employed in building the Danube-Black Sea Canal, which, according to official announcements, is now completed over a stretch of about 2 miles. The canal, originally approved by the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, the Moscow Marshall Plan, is designed to allow Russian seagoing vessels, up to 15,000 tons, easy access to the Balkans. There are 3 principal categories of workers on the canal: free or voluntary workers, slave workers, and peasant carters. All Romanian newspapers carry advertisements inviting people to volunteer for work on the canal, but today there are believed to be no true volunteer workers on the canal. Apart from a handful of officials, all free workers, whether communist or non-party members, are there because they were given no choice when they applied for a job. The non-party member free workers sent to the Canal are those who have a putrid social origin, that is, they are the offspring of the now extinct bourgeoisie. The party members are sent there as a disciplinary measure. The workers are housed in wooden barracks, about 40 in each. They have no beds to themselves. As soon as one shift goes out to work, the other turns in. By the time the fines imposed on the workers for being a few minutes late or for not fulfilling their task are deducted, there is little left. The 8-hour working day is invariably followed by such activities as trade union meetings, Russian language courses, improvement courses in working technique, work coordination, commemorative meetings, choir, sport, and Romanian-Russian Friendship Society meetings, and, for party members only, civil defence courses. Every day, Sunday excepted, the programme lasts between 11 and 12 hours. There are reported to be 30,000 slave labourers, distributed in 8 labour camps known as colonies.
After the retreat of Soviet troops in 1958, a new period of terror began in Romania. Gheorghiu Dej needed to consolidate his rule. In 1960, the number of political prisoners had reached an unprecedented number. More than 70,000 people were imprisoned for crimes against the state.
The Economist, 25th of October 1958. Romania's legal repression. Fuller details are now known of the amendments to the Romanian Penal Code that were made in July, extremely vague and imprecise in definition, and retroactive in application. Their effect is to cast a cloak of legality over the renewed repression that began in Romania more than a year ago and has been growing increasingly severe in recent months. The death penalty is introduced for more than a score of offences, among them any act which could subjugate the state to a foreign power. One might think that the communist leaders themselves would be the first to qualify.
Gradually, Romania began to distance herself from the Soviet Union. During the early 60s, a period of so-called liberalization began. The number of political prisoners decreased and some were amnestied. Gheorghiu Dej died in 1965, and on March 22nd, Nicolae Ceausescu became the new Secretary General.
The Times, 6th of June, 1965. Romanian party to change name. Like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, both of which have changed their names into socialist as distinct from People's Republics, Romania seems also to be now preparing to announce her entry into the club of those countries which claim to have achieved socialism and are embarking upon the highest communist phase of development. This seems to be the meaning of the Central Committee's decision to change what until now was officially known as the Romanian Workers' Party into the Communist Party of Romania. Such a formal gesture may seem rather meaningless, except, of course, as yet another confirmation of Romania's self-confidence and the regime's endeavours to achieve complete equality with Russia. Russia and Czechoslovakia, in abstract terms of Marxism, have entered the stage of building communism, and the Romanians evidently do not wish to be left behind. Hence the announcement that the party congress, due to be held in July, will confirm the new name of the Romanian party, which, as Mr. Nicolae Ceausescu, the new party secretary, said, better corresponds to the country's present stage of development. After this, the People's Republic of Romania will no doubt solemnly change its name into the Socialist Republic of Romania. While this may sound rather abstract, it nevertheless shows that the successors of Mr. Gheorghiu Dej are determined to extend their country's independence.
Ceausescu continued the policy of his predecessor in relation to the Soviet Union. He also adopted some internal reforms and denounced the abusive behavior of previous communist leaders. In August 1968, Ceausescu refused to join the invasion of Czechoslovakia.
The Times, August the 22nd, 1968. Romania forms an armed militia. The Romanian government has decided on the immediate creation of an armed national militia to defend the country's independence. Mr. Ceausescu, the party leader, told a crowd of 100,000 in the capital today, during a speech in which he denounced Soviet intervention in Czechoslovakia. After declaring that the invasion was a grave error and constitutes a serious danger to peace in Europe and for the prospects of world socialism, he went on to announce new government measures. We have decided to begin today the formation of patriotic armed guards made up of workers, peasants and intellectuals to defend the country's independence. We want our people to have armed units with which to defend their revolutionary achievements and the security and independence of the socialist homeland.
The main consequence was that Ceausescu gained the respect and approval of countries beyond the Iron Curtain. In August 1969, Romania was visited by President Nixon. In 1978, Ceausescu visited the United Kingdom.
The Times, June the 14th, 1978. Traditional start for first state visit by a communist leader. President Ceausescu of Romania began his state visit in traditional style yesterday when he drove with the Queen in an open carriage from Victoria Station, London, where he and Mrs. Ceausescu had arrived by special train from Gatwick Airport to Buckingham Palace. Large crowds had gathered in rather dull weather along the route round Parliament Square and up Whitehall for a sight of the procession. The only sign of protesters was a small silent group standing by the barriers outside the station with a placard reading "Human Rights for Romanian Christians." The first leader of a communist country to pay a state visit, President Ceausescu will stay at Buckingham Palace until Friday morning. The more political side of his visit begins today, with 2 sessions of talks at 10 Downing Street, presided over by Mr. James Callaghan, the Prime Minister, and various calls to Buckingham Palace by senior ministers, bankers and industrialists. Queen's praise. At a state banquet at Buckingham Palace, the Queen said Britain was anxious to expand its trade with Romania and find new forms of commercial and industrial cooperation. In an obvious reference to the proposed £200 million deal which Romania will build, the BAC 111 airliner, she said, "Nowadays the trade is more sophisticated and we have enjoyed excellent cooperation with your country for many years, particularly in the field of aviation." She praised the Romanians for their heroic struggle for independence and added, "Today we in Britain are impressed by the resolute stand you have taken to sustain that independence. Our societies and systems of government were very different, but we had many interests in common." President Ceausescu said Romania hoped for further collaboration with Britain.
The last decade of communism in Romania was marked by brutal social measures and economic hardship. Motivated by the ambition of paying off all external debt, Ceausescu imposed drastic limitations on energy and common goods consumption.
The Times, 15th of February 1977. Dissidents in Romania complain of suppression. 8 Romanian human rights activists have issued an open letter complaining to Romanian human rights in their country. The letter, which reached Belgrade today, called on the 35 states due to attend a European Security Conference here in June to hold a separate meeting on the defence of human rights. The 8 said that the Romanian government did not respect the principles of free travel for its citizens, the free circulation of ideas and press freedom enshrined in the 1975 Helsinki Declaration on Human Rights and Détente, which Romania signed. The group said that Romania was among countries where ideas were imposed by force and work is more important than the human who is working. Although the constitution guaranteed basic human rights, these were denied. The letter, addressed to all participants in the Belgrade conference, went on, "We protest against all possible forms of suppression, physical, moral and intellectual, which occur in political prisons, camps and psychological clinics, or in old or new gulags which trample underfoot the concepts of freedom and dignity." The letter did not name any country, but clearly alluded to the Soviet bloc states. Mr. Paul Goma, its author, is the only signatory known outside Romania. He has been in trouble with the authorities since his novel, Ostinato, rejected by the Bucharest censor, was published in West Germany in 1971. A second novel, The Door, was published in West Germany a year later and also banned in Romania. Both dealt with lack of freedom. Mr. Gomer, who spent several years in prison in the late 1950s as a revisionist, last week wrote to the Paris newspaper Le Monde, supporting Czechoslovak dissidents.